Hi, and thank you for being here today. My name is Maria Mandarino, certified spiritual director and Enneagram practitioner and licensed acupuncturist and certified Bach flower practitioner. So in the series that we're working on right now, we're talking about the Enneagram types and the flower remedies, flower essences. The particular system that I'm trained in is the Bach flower system, but I do work with a couple of other flower remedies outside of the Bach system. I make some of my own flowers that are from desert plants where I live in the Phoenix Valley of Arizona. So sometimes I use what's available to me and make my own. So that's a little bit about me. So again, thank you for being here. And this series is called Patterns of Truth. My inspiration for calling it that is I think there is truth in all patterns. If the pattern keeps playing out, to me, it is a language of the divine. And it's up to us to discern the pattern so we can engage in the conversation of the spirit. So patterns of truth, patterns in the Enneagram. This is also called sacred geometry or fractals, right? You may have heard those words, but there's patterns in the Enneagram symbol. And there's patterns of behavior that you'll see in the Bach flower system as well, in flower remedy systems in general. Certainly not the only systems of sacred geometry among the two that I work with. As an acupuncturist, I also work 5-element systems. So I'm always looking for patterns. If I find the pattern, I know there's a divine truth in it. And that's how I landed on this series and calling it Patterns of Truth. So today we're going to look at type 5 in the Enneagram, and the flower essence that's going to correspond to type 5 is water violet. So something I want to mention about the flower remedies first, this is probably one of the ones you'd be most familiar with. This is called it's called Rescue Remedy. We call it the crisis formula. It's for general stress. It's just a good thing to have on hand. As I said in my last episode, I keep one in the kitchen cabinet for emergencies, and I keep one in my purse. So it's just a go-to when something comes up that we don't expect that might be a stressor. It's a really good go-to. That said, as a practitioner, we make custom formulas for people. So and that's based on a talk session where the person comes in, talks about the things that are stressing them out. I ask questions. I have 20 years of training behind me doing this. So I ask very specific questions to extract the root cause of what's going on. So that's how that works. So they're taken internally. And today I have my water violet here with me. So this is the one we're going to look at today, water violet. So they're taken internally. The formula, when we make a custom formula, it'll have up to 7 flower remedies in it. And then we use those each day. The person will take them 4 times a day to create harmony in the emotional imbalance, whatever's going on, the stressor, the struggle. Those are taken and they last about 3 weeks. And then we meet again and we look at the layer that's underneath that until we get to the root cause. So that's how that works. So these are not essential oils. They work entirely differently. It's basically the spirit of the flower that we work with. It's not actual plant material. It's also not an herbal formula. It's more like homeopathy. If you examine the actual formula under a microscope, they'll find that there's nothing in it except essentially water. But the energy of the flower is retained in that formula. And that's what comes into relationship with our energy, basically, and helps us to become more harmonious with what's going on in our lives. So they're wonderful teachers, basically. So before we go further, I do want to remind you to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Click the bell so you get alerts on the upcoming episodes and things that are happening. My class on the Enneagram should be coming up. I hope if all the tech goes well, because this has been a horrible summer with tech for me. I'm hoping for September 25th. I'm going to beg your patience if I don't quite hit that date. It should be very near to that date, though. as long as everything goes well. And so far, it looks like it should. So, yeah. So you'll be notified if you click that alert bell of when that's coming up and the details of how to get in on the class. Also, before we go further, I do want to mention that this information isn't really meant to self-diagnose. It's really not how either one of these systems works, the Enneagram or the Bach flowers. Of course, you can use them that way, but if you really want to get into the deep work and do the deep dive, it's really recommended that you do this work with somebody who's trained in it, ideally trained and certified in both systems. I am certified in both. And that's not to say you have to work with me, but there are people out there. So I would really recommend working with the supervision of somebody who has these skills. Reason being, with both the Enneagram and the flower remedies, we can tell ourselves nice stories about what we think we're doing, and what we think is going on, and how and why we think we're reacting the way we're reacting. And all it takes is one really well-placed question from somebody who's observing us and who's really listening to us, to just say, well, can back up a little bit. You just said this. Can you tell me a little bit more about what that means? And then, man, the minefield that can just reveal itself. And that's where the real deep work happens. That's how we discern a formula, first of all. But even with the Enneagram, that's just how we get to the really deep stuff. So I really encourage you to work with someone. And if you're working with something that's really profound and serious and has been going on and plaguing you for a long time, reach out to a counselor as well. If you can find a counselor that works with both of these systems, awesome. I've not encountered anybody. It doesn't mean that they don't exist, but yeah, I mean, if they're not familiar with the Enneagram or the Bach flowers, but you have really deep, long-standing issues, certainly working with a counselor and working with an Enneagram professional and a Bach flower practitioner can certainly all come together for the greater good. So I just want to mention that. Okay. So let's do a little quick review of Enneagram Type 5. And I know a couple of my 5s have been really awesome with sharing comments here. So I want to thank you, first of all, for doing that. Encourage the other 8 types out there to please share. The 5s didn't surprise me, right? Because we like information and we like it on our terms without somebody knocking on our front door to ask about it. So, this platform is kind of perfect for that, for a Type 5. So thank you. So I want to start with some of the lower qualities of Type 5. I think it's kind of a fun place to start. So Type 5s in their lower expression, and this is typically the person who, myself included, because here you're looking at a Type 5, before I knew anything about the Enneagram, this was kind of where I lived. And then the Enneagram taught me there was so much more to myself when I was willing to face myself and the reasons why my formatting was what it was and where my growth points could be. So this one is relatable. I think they're all relatable though. So the lower qualities of Type 5, they can be overly private. Again, this is lower expression. Overly private. The one thing a Type 5 hates more than just about anything in the world is an uninvited intrusion. Type 5s, you know what I'm talking about, right? So again, it's that person knocking on the door. Text first, right? So yeah, and God forbid the phone rings, right? So we want the text before you call, text before you ring the doorbell, right? So overly private in their lower expressions. I'm having a little fun with you. Type 5s in their lower expression can be reclusive. They withdraw from emotions or emotional situations. They're going to just kind of retreat, almost disappear into the wall if they can, quietly and tactfully. They can be hypervigilant with their boundaries. And again, this is the lower side. So these are the extremes that you're going to see in your 5s. They will hoard information because information is valued above all else, except maybe privacy. They're probably neck and neck, honestly. Others can see them in their lower expression as standoffish and snobbish or eccentric. When they feel done with a person, particularly on an intellectual level, like if you can't meet them in a serious intellectual discussion and it's like clear you're never going to hear what they're saying, they're going to walk away quietly. They're not going to argue with you. You just all of a sudden, like, I haven't heard from them in like 8 months, kind of thing. And you might never hear from them again. So that's, again, that's the lower expression of a 5. Lower expression, sarcastic and cynical. Not that they're the only types that are, but they're among them. No, particularly noteworthy is that type 5s in their lower expression believe that they do not have enough energy. And what's really important to remember is that they actually do, but they're convinced that they don't. And they are very guarded against the possibility that somebody might want more from them than they have to give. So, so that's important to note. And the last thing is when people that are living at that vibrational level, because to me the Enneagram is all about energy. And again, I'm an acupuncturist, so everything's about energy anyway. But when somebody's vibrating at that level, and they don't do the work of self-awareness and the work of the Enneagram, or whatever inner personality work that they choose, if they don't do that work, that person ends up lonely. So, so that's part of the lower expression, the lower registers of 5. So, so here's what we get when we do the inner work, when we become self-aware, when we get uncomfortable, and we reach our growth point as a 5. Self-sufficiency and independence. They're calm in a crisis. I will tell you, as a 5, I do crises like few other people around me. I don't mean to say I enjoy them because I don't think anybody enjoys a crisis, but I know how to do them. And I step in, step up, and it's handled. And here's the interesting thing for me as a 5. There's no processing time. 5s usually need, I call it tape delay. You go to a party, you have a conversation with somebody, and 2 hours later, you're like, why did I mention, oh my God, that's like the most important thing I should have discussed. And I like totally spaced and forgot. So those things come back to 5s after, after the critical moment, right? But not in a crisis when a 5 is coming from their higher registers. Okay. There's no thinking involved. So 5's a head type, right? Don't have to think. It's like they use their body. The 3 types of the body, the heart, and the head types, right? So they have access to body, and they just step in, handle the crisis. They move to the front of the crowd, which is totally where you never expect to see a 5. Okay, but a highly actualized 5 can do that. Important to note that after the crisis, they're going to need decompression time because that took a lot of energy for them to do. Okay, so they do still need to go back and plug in, right? As I mentioned in one of the last episodes, we were talking about the 5s and narcissists and the bubble, right? Not that they need the bubble to protect themselves from somebody who's intrusive, but that bubble is a place where they can just go back to plug in, tap in, restore their energy so they can reemerge back out into the world of the rest of y'all. Okay, so yeah. They have incredibly sharp minds capable of great depth, very detail oriented, but they can also dive into the deep with you with those details. They hold things as neutral. They hold situations as neutral, struggles between people, conflicts between, they can just kind of hold everything. We call it omniscience, the ability to just see and hold all for what it is. Very perceptive and intuitive, similar to the type 6. We talked about that in the last episode. They're generally seen as being wise people in their higher expression and insightful. So I'm going to jump over to water violet flower remedy. And again, this is in the box system, but it does appear in some other systems of flower essences. The 2 key words that Dr. Bach associated with water violet are proud and aloof. Okay. I thought when I was first studying the remedies, some 20 years ago, when I heard the description of water violet, I thought of Greta Garbo. I kind of called it, you kind of try to remember remedies because we've got to remember 38 of them. You try to like free associate, and I always thought that was the Garbo remedy, Greta Garbo remedy, because Greta Garbo was known for saying, "I want to be alone." Okay, so my little puppy here doesn't want to be alone. Hope she behaves. Um, but this is Nala. So yeah, so Greta Garbo was known for that saying, I want to be alone. Okay. So that's kind of how water violets behave. And this is what we call a type flower, by the way. Not all flowers are thought to be type flowers, but this one, if somebody is a water violet type, it tends to come up in their formula frequently over time. Okay. The interesting thing about water violet is it grows as a flower all by itself in the middle of a pond. And that's like exactly what I mean when I say we look to the behavior of the flower to determine how it acts for the person. It grows entirely by itself, this one single flower in the middle of a pond, no other flowers around it. Likes to be alone, right? So, and that's exactly what it treats, the person who wants to be left alone. So some qualities of the water violet type sounds remarkably like type 5 to me. And I don't know if there's a type bias in this. I mean, some of them really have like a 1-for-1 like description. And I think this is just one of them. Water violet type is knowledgeable, right? So type 5 values knowledge and information. Right there, the first one. They're calm. So in the highest expression of the 5, right? Calm in a crisis. So we've got an echo there. Water violet is highly capable. They're private, right? Private people don't like what? Intrusions, right? So right there, we've got 5 energy going on in our water violet remedy. They're sedate. They're not the person who's going to be running to the front of the line. They're not the ones that are likely to be at karaoke grabbing the microphone. Neither would be the type 5, most likely. Water violet types are typically asked for advice, but they don't volunteer it. So they're sought out essentially for their wisdom. People who pay attention to them as sedate and calm and quiet as they are, people notice them for what they bring, which is this quiet, reserved wisdom, right? So they don't volunteer that wisdom because they're quiet and sedate and reserved, right? But it's noticed and it's valued in the people that notice it, or some of the people that notice it. And so the water violet type is often asked for their advice, for their wisdom, or their access to wisdom. They are self-reliant. So that's another thing that comes up with the higher expression of 5, right? Self-reliance. Independence was another word we used. They have a sense of superiority. So here's where we get on that slippery slope of the low side, right? So a sense of superiority can emerge or can be perceived in the water violet by others. They can seem aloof. Again, aloof and proud were the 2 words that Dr. Bach put on the flower, or disdainful. One of my favorite SAT words, by the way, disdainful and condescending. I said that like a real 5, I think, but so yeah, so aloof, proud, disdainful, and condescending. Again, this is the lower registers of somebody who really needs that water violet because they're going to a negative place. They withdraw when tired. So doesn't that sound like the 5 who thinks they don't have enough energy and they're always like, I need to go take a rest. I need a nap. I need to just retreat with a book because I'm too tired to mow the lawn or whatever, right? So they withdraw when tired, the water violet type, the person who needs water violet, right? Withdraws when tired. They don't like to share their troubles because they're private, right? Private people, reclusive people don't like to share their troubles. So again, that's something that they have with the 5s because the 5s value privacy. They're not airing their laundry on the front porch with people. Not a type 5. And they can find it hard to open up to people because they are so reclusive, because they do want to be alone. If they spend most of their life that way, and some water violets do, and some fives do, it's almost like they lose social skills. If it's like a muscle, if you don't exercise it, you lose it. So yeah, that can be a thing with a water violet who is neglected working on themselves. That they can be hard to open up to others and form, relationships. So, and again, that gets back to the five. The risk of the five who never emerges from their lower side runs the risk of loneliness. So a lot of real similarities there. And then the positive potential of the water violet is that they are people who can be warm with others. They have a warmth, a natural warmth. Again, they're not running up to the front of the room to grab the microphone, but when they engage with you, when they connect with you, they're there. They're really, all of themselves is there with you in a two-way exchange, right? So this warmth. And they also maintain their dignity. So it's not like they run into the woohoo. They're not going to go to the front of the room with the microphone, right? There's going to be this reserve and dignity about it, but they're going to, there's a warmth and a connection that happens, a genuineness and authenticity that emerges in the positive potential, positive expression of the water violet type. So when we give water violet, this is what we hope to bring up in the personality, if that is missing, if they're struggling with that. And there's a serenity with water violets when it is given, and makes the person more empathetic because they're more engaged. They're able to be in relationship, and when we're genuinely and authentically in relationship with people, we are able to be empathetic. So that's what emerges. All right, so we are at the part of the episode where I'm going to give you some journal questions if you so choose. And I'm betting my fives are going to do that more than anyone else. But I encourage everyone to journal. From my acupuncture practice to my spiritual direction work, I really encourage people to journal. So it's a way of accessing, first of all, committing to paper. The things that we access that otherwise we might not land on. Because there's this process that happens, and I encourage you to journal the old-fashioned way. I mean, you see the color of my hair, right? So I didn't come up with computers. And some people do like to journal on computers. And I write, my writing is typically, if I write a newsletter, if I'm working on an article, I type it. Okay, but when it comes to journaling, there's nothing like this and paper. Okay. So I encourage you, because the handwriting process slows down, especially for type 5, this thing, which likes to run really fast. Okay. For the head types, 5, 6, and 7, this all wants to run. Okay. So the physical process of writing things out, with a pen and paper, I encourage you to journal that way. It's not, I mean, if you really feel that that's a struggle, do it however, it's better to do it than not do it at all. So with that, journal question number 1, I want you to ask yourself, how old was I when I learned that information and knowledge were my safe place? And I'll have these in the show notes for you as well. How old was I when I learned that information and knowledge were my safe place? Journal question number 2. What is my earliest memory of feeling intruded upon and then feeling anxious? What is my earliest memory of feeling intruded upon and feeling anxious? Number 3, and this is the final one. Recall a time when you were calm in a crisis. What was that like? How did others view you? How did you feel afterwards? How might you reframe that experience if you had it to do over again today? So again, the third one. Recall a time when you were calm in a crisis. What was that like? How did others view you? How did you feel afterwards? And how might you reframe that experience if you had it all to do over again now? All right, so there's some stuff to explore. Take your time, enjoy it. Not sure if I said it in this episode or the last, but I'll repeat it if I already said it. If there's another method that you have for examining the personality, welcome that into this journal, this journal exercise. So if there's something else you know about yourself through another system, maybe Myers-Briggs, maybe astrology, whatever other means for exploration, perhaps it's a tarot, okay, the archetypal tarot, which is something else that I work with. But invite it all in and let it move through you and onto the page. And I promise you that there is a greater wisdom that will come out of this. Okay. So, thank you for being here today, for being open to some new and different ideas about how to examine and harmonize the personality. If you are interested in scheduling an Enneagram session with me, Enneagram typing, I also do a 15-minute, just a free consultation where we just meet. We don't actually do Enneagram work, but we just kind of meet and chat to kind of see if we think we would, be a good fit together. You can do that. You can schedule spiritual direction with me as well. If you are interested in spiritual direction, I really do encourage you to do that 15-minute consult first so we can really get a feel for each other, because that really is something that is reliant upon both of us. And then the Bach flower remedies, you can also schedule that session. That comes with a formula that would be shipped to you. You can do that through my website as well, mariamandarino.com. I'll have that in the show notes as well. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share. And again, thank you for your participation in this channel, because it has really been cool to see things grow and expand and reach new people that otherwise I would never have been able to reach without your help. So thank you so much. And I will see you next week. You have a great week. Take care. Bye-bye.